Hey everyone, I'm Kate Kennedy and I'm here with day 23 of 100 days of Keene, PA. And if you guys know John Knapp, you know that he has so many interesting stories to share. He's lived in Keene his entire life and just has some really great ways of telling some stories of his life experiences. And today he's going to share a really meaningful story to him about a parade that happened in the early 90s that meant a lot and made a difference. So I'm going to go ahead and flip you around and we're going to go ahead and talk with Mr. Knapp. Hello, how are you today?
I'm just fine.
Thank you so much for having us.
Glad to do it.
So what year were you born?
1944.
And where?
Keene Hospital, I believe at the Keene Community Hospital.
All right.
And I think I was born in the elevator.
Oh, so 1944, you were born in Keene and you went to school here. What year did you graduate?
1962, and it was not a very auspicious educational time.
So we were talking earlier and you were sharing with me some of the jobs that you held throughout your school career, and it was so interesting to me. So could you share your elementary, middle, and high school work history?
I started off as a paper boy in 4th grade. I had 26 papers. Within a year, I had 52 papers. And about 2 years after that, I had 70 some papers. And when I was in middle school, 8th grade and 9th grade, that had gone up to over 120 customers.
Wow, you really increased that.
And I had a cadre of wonderful elderly friends that I would stop and chat with almost every day. Some of these elderly women, I think they never talked to anybody else, and I was their contact. One old fellow used to walk clear down to Glenwood to watch me play knothole baseball, and then finally the first year of Legion baseball.
So you made some friends along the paper route as well.
I had a lot of elderly friends.
What was your route? Like, what were some of the streets that you hit?
Biddle, Greaves, Yarnell, Welsh, Hacker, Clay, Lincoln. I pedaled the Keene Manor. I just pretty much this end of town.
Yeah, I biked all over the place. Okay, so in high school, what was your job?
I quit the paper route in 9th grade and went to work helping to peddle milk in the morning with a local dairy, Wahlberg's Dairy, and I would get dropped off at school during school at about 20 to 8 unless it was Coraliers practice time, and I was a Coralier my sophomore, junior, and senior year, and then I would get dropped off at about 25 after 7. And then I would go out and work sometimes in the evening, not all the time, but sometimes, and work all summer, haying and doing the things necessary. And ultimately then I got a job at Sears Roebuck for my senior year, where I washed floors, shipped, packed, received, took care of janitorial tasks, and in general did everything nobody else was doing.
And for those who might not remember, where was the Sears Roebuck?
Where the Chinese restaurant is in the middle of Fraley Street.
Okay. So then you graduate high school, and what was next?
I went to college at Edinburgh and had a really good time for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't go to college for a little while. I worked on pipeline with Tennessee Gas for some time, and that was a growing experience, and I met some really great people to work with. And then I went to Buffalo, and I worked in a mill up there for part of the time and went to school part of the time. And then one morning I got up and walked into the AFES Center and enlisted in the Army.
All right.
Vietnam had begun, and I looked in a mirror and saw a guy who used to weigh 170 pounds that weighed 205 pounds, and I had been partying too much, and I wasn't satisfied with that. I always wanted to be a writer. I was going to be the next Hemingway. And he served his country. He was in Spain before the war and then served in the war. And I thought I need that experience, so I joined the Army with delusions of grandeur.
All right, and how long were you in the Army?
3 years. December of 65 until December of 68.
And you served?
I served, did training first and then volunteered for Vietnam. And I served for 15 months from August of 66 until October of 67.
All right. Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So then let's kind of fast forward a little bit. I know there's a lot in between there, but the story you wanted to share today revolves around a parade. Could you go ahead and start with that?
Yes. I'm having trouble recalling dates into really year, but I think it was around 1990. And it seems to me that it may have been one of those firemen's parades coupled with the Keene Fest that was held down at Chestnut Street School. And it was to be a big parade and a big festival day, the biggest day of the year in Keene. And several women that I can recall were responsible for some of the parade participation. And those persons that I can recall, Roseanne Counts, Miss Mitz Linguist, and Lori Kajancic. And there may have been others, but those are the three specific names that I remember being associated with the recruiting of veterans groups representing each of World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. They sent those invitations out publicly in the newspaper for people who would be interested in participating in walking in those units. And they got good participation right away from World War II vets and the Korean vets, and no participation from Vietnam vets. I could have told them that's what was going to happen.
It was complicated, right?
That just had never happened. We'd never done a parade. We'd never been there. Some of us may have walked with a group at large of veterans, but never as Vietnam veterans. Being a Vietnam veteran in the time since the war began until that time was not really something you professed to be openly, because it just was associated with a lot of trouble. These three women wouldn't accept no for an answer. And they decided that the tactic that would be most helpful to them was forget talking to the guys, talk to their wives. And they did that very well. And the wives did what they do very well. Don't you think it'd be a good idea, John, to do this? It might be helpful to you. And against my better judgment, I said I'd do it. So the day of the parade arrives, and it's to be a huge parade, really big parade for Keene standards, and that's why I associate it with a fireman's parade. Mm-hmm. We met at the VFW club, and there gathered probably 30 or 40 World War II vets, and maybe 25 Korean War vets, maybe a few more than that, and maybe 24 Vietnam vets.
Which was a huge turnout after having none sign up initially.
It was an amazing turnout. And if it had been any less than that, there wouldn't have been any, because those that came would have left.
Yeah.
There was a lot of camaraderie in the other two veterans groups. There was a whole lot of misgiving in our group. Nobody wanted to take that walk through Main Street. We had each experienced our own homecomings. And there were no thank you for your service. There were no welcome home. There were just drop into the ranks, fella, and forget about it, because we didn't want anything to do with that war.
It was a really tough time, yeah.
It was hard to come to grips with that. And here we are in 1990. I came home from the war in 1967. 1990. 23 years.
Still stuck
and
with you.
Still, I had never worn a Vietnam veteran hat or done anything like that at that time. But we formed up and kind of diddy-bopped our way, not on up Wetmore Avenue, but out the street to where Bell's is, and then turned right, and we walked up Fraley Street and then up that hill to get to the main business district. On the way, the World War II vets were walking and talking, and some of them riding in cars. And the Korean War vets were kind of walking in a bunch and laughing and joking, and the Vietnam vets were walking in a disorganized mob, grumbling. We went past the Keene Republican and climbed the rest of the hill up to where Fraley Street intersects with Haynes Street. And we looked down Fraley, and it was literally packed with people there for the parade. Right then, we lost some of our crew. They just left. They didn't say anything, they just left. I've never held that against them. It was in my mind, it was in my heart, and this was hard.
It was emotional. You were nervous, and
we had no idea what to expect.
yeah.
And for most of us, every encounter like that, individual or otherwise, had been really a bad experience. The grumbling increased. There was a tension that was palpable. And one of our crew, who wasn't a Vietnam veteran, he was a Vietnam era veteran, which means he didn't serve there, but was in the service at that time. His name was Bob Swanson. He was a state police officer. I had graduated a year ahead of him in high school. I'd known him for a long time, played Legion baseball against him for 3 years. He stepped out of ranks and said, "Look, form up in ranks of 4, and we'll march through there. You won't have to look left or right. I'll call a cadence, and we'll just do this our way." So here we are. I spectacularly was wearing a pair of cut-off jeans shorts and a black t-shirt. We were dressed in all sorts of different regalia, no uniforms except for 3 or 4 people in the back who were career soldiers. And here we come down the street. A left, a left, a left, right, left. Eyes straight ahead, locked in, not looking left or right, not waving to anybody. Breathless. I was then running 30 miles a week. I was in tremendous condition, and I was out of breath for the whole walk. Nervous tension, to say the least. Somehow, we made it through Main Street. We made it to the turn down Hemlock, where it was supposed to be disbanded. And somebody called out to us, I think it may have been one of those three girls, to stay in ranks because they wanted to get a picture. And no sooner was that out of their mouth, whomever said it, it was a total dispersal. We were gone.
When you were walking down Main Street, how did people respond? Like, what do you remember hearing? Or I know you were looking ahead, but what do you remember about that?
Being locked in means you're locked in and facing straight ahead. It doesn't mean you're unconscious. They applauded.
And what was that like for you to hear applause when you were so nervous to take that walk?
It's still emotional. And I'll get over this in a moment.
Oh, I think it's beautiful.
There were a few peace signs and a couple of one finger not peace signs, but most of it was applause. Couldn't believe it.
What does that mean to you?
Well, it takes time for me. I'm a little slow sometimes. And almost all of the big things that have happened to me in life have taken some time to consider and work through and deal with. In the end, it was cathartic. It was saying, you are proud of your service, and I am. There's nothing to be ashamed of here. If somebody wants to call that to your attention, let them. I'd never had a Vietnam veteran hat. I was asked some years later, probably 6 years ago, to MC a Memorial Day service, which I love doing that kind of thing. And as an award, Russ Counts, who was the head of the VFW, who had asked me, who was the guy I walked beside in that parade, gave me a Vietnam veteran hat, which I never wore except for on Veterans Day, because it still wasn't something I was ready to do. This year, I bought one. Because when I saw somebody with one of those hats, I'd say, "Welcome home, brother."
That's amazing. And what do you think about those ladies? Like, what would you want to say to those women who, they weren't going to let you off the hook? They knew that this was important. They knew that you needed to be represented because your service mattered. So they roped in your wives. And so they got you there. What would you want to say to them, or what does that mean to you?
I did say it to one of them. I went to her house. I knocked on the door. And I told her that I had walked that parade. And what it meant. It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Well, that is a really, I think, just powerful story that you shared with us. And I'm sure there's so much more to it. Is there anything else about that you'd like to share?
No, I think that's about all I did.
Okay. And one thing I like to ask a lot of people who do these stories is, especially you were born here, raised here, you raised your family here, and you're still here in Keene. What is it that you love about Keene? Why are you still here?
Growing up here, and I talked to you about having jobs. I also played baseball. I was a 4-year starter on the American Legion team, and it was one of the 2 teams Pat Santelli picked out as his best the 1955 and the 1961 Legion teams. I went on to coach Little League. I helped build the Little League field at Landmark, and then again out in the country where it is now. I like to teach baseball more than I like to coach it, and work with pitchers. I even worked with Butch Slopey and Steve Tunall when they were pitching in the Pirate organizations in the wintertime. I played in the Keene Men's Softball League until I was 45. And I loved doing it. I don't know what young men do now. What I love about living here in Keene is we live in the middle of a wonderland. We didn't do some of the things that other folks did with boating and snowmobiles and things like that. But I had a canoe, and we paddled around all kinds of creeks and lakes in our Radisson canoe. We all had cross-country skis, all 5 of us. At one time, I could outfit you with cross-country ski boots from Josh's tiny feet at that time to Andy's when he wore a size 13 and a half basketball shoe. So we could outfit anybody. We liked to go tobogganing. We went on long hikes in the woods. A fun day for the Knapp family was to head off in a pickup truck or a Bronco when I was working in the oil fields and find a creek, and the kids would be playing in the water, and somehow we didn't get snake bit. But we enjoyed our time here, and we enjoyed what this country provides. A little slower than some places. My kids who wanted to, both of them played sports and played varsity level sports. Some cities wouldn't have had a place for them. They did a lot of things when they were here. And Linda and I have been able to do a lot of things living here. We've sung in church choirs. We've sung in community choirs. Music has been very important to us. So I loved living here.
Yeah, this is a special place. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
I think I've done quite enough.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate your story today. All right, everyone. What a powerful story about just having courage to try something and having the people around you to encourage you to do it, and how that has made such a difference. And I just feel so grateful that Mr. Knapp shared that story with us today. Has there been a time in your life when there has been something that you didn't really want to do, but others encouraged you to, and then once you did it, you could see how helpful it was? If there is, please share that in the comments, because I think that's part of what makes us a great community, is that we help each other out. And I really appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate this story so much. It was really touching, and I hope that it meant something to you as well. And thanks for watching today, and I'll see you again tomorrow for day 24.